And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Let's start off with the CDC. Yes, the Center for Disease Control. Evidently, their director, a guy named Robert Redfield, he is saying that the number of coronavirus infections in the U.S. could be as high as 10 times the official count as of right now, saying that that could mean that more than 20 million people across this country are infected. Now, remember, they were saying by the end of the year, you could see, if we did nothing, half of the country infected, mass numbers of death. So what we've done so far, kind of slowing it down a little bit. But what we're doing now, you got to wonder, not so much, but to question the official numbers in a more sane way, I think is helpful to say, look, it's actually worse than what's being reported, not what Trump and the Republican apologists are throwing out, that, we're not testing at a rate high enough. We need to be testing more to find out, how many people actually have this, to give people accurate information. You go out into public now and people are like, well, hey, it's green, everything's great, it's all fine, because we're not hearing the daily updates anymore. We're really not focused on. We're on other stuff now. We've kind of moved on. We're kind of post concern of COVID. Sad reality is this ain't going away. And if the numbers are what this guy's saying they are, this is bad. Because remember, Donald Trump had said, summertime, it's all going to go away. If this is the going away, if this is what going away looks like, yesterday had the largest number of infections that we've had through the entire pandemic. If this is what going away looks like, we're in trouble come the fall. When flu season comes back around, when this is in an environment where it's much more easily spread and gains more strength, we're in for a real rude awakening. And this is one of those moments where I keep coming back to the reality of, you've got a leader in Donald Trump who doesn't even believe his own experts. And you see reports coming out today, again, and we've seen these stories numerous times over the last several months, that, Trump and the experts are infighting. And according to NBC News, they're saying, look, as Trump is spinning this tale that, we're at the end of it, his experts are saying, whoa, we haven't gotten through the end of the first wave yet. In fact, this is an explosion in the first wave. The second wave isn't for till the fall. We should be preparing for that. We should be doing more now, and we're wasting valuable time on truly an incompetent leader who only cares about himself. Only cares about re-election, only cares about the message that comes out and the distraction that he can create. That's the reality. And it's one of those moments where you look at it and you go, look, I hate being right. My wife's going to roll her eyes, but I do. I hate being right in these moments. Because we said months ago, if we don't take this seriously, all of the sacrifice, all of the struggle of being locked in our houses and self-quarantining and sheltering in place, all of that's going to be for naught. And you look at the southern states who are basically flipping their noses at everybody, saying, the old cartoon fables. Now they're getting hit with it. And you hate to be right. You hate to be the I told you so. But we told you so. And now you're seeing the governor of Texas say, well, we can't reopen just yet. Now you're seeing some of the southern senators going, well, wear your mask. Marco Rubio, wear your damn mask. Well, yeah. Should have been doing that when you had it under control. And this is, again, this moment is so powerful because right now where I'm at, it's somewhat under control. It's not out of hand. Our ICU units aren't filled to the brim. I saw a story today. Mississippi doesn't have, the entire state of Mississippi doesn't have one ICU bed available. Let that sink in for a minute. Because it's not like they had the greatest healthcare infrastructure to begin with, which again, something else we talked about at a time when the Trump administration is attempting to destroy the ACA. But that's a whole nother conversation. The entire state, not one available bed. And I know it's just a fake news media who's blowing this out of proportion. Understand, and this is one of those weird moments where I'm going to err always in this scenario on the side of caution. I believe nothing that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth. And I think he has shown over the last 3.5 years that he is not someone that you can trust. He is not someone that is going to tell the truth. He's not even someone who knows the truth. He only knows his reality and what he can get out of it for himself. This is very clear. The statement, and I beg someone to defend a leader saying, if we just stop testing, we'd have no more coronavirus. Please defend that at a time when we've got now the most cases that we've had since the entire pandemic. And we're still not doing testing at the level that we should be. We're nowhere near the level of tests that we should be doing. But here's what the Republicans are doing, and I look to West Virginia. Republican Governor Jim Justice, who was a Democrat, flipped over to being Republican. But here again, even the Democrats in West Virginia, they are what they are. Evidently, Jim Justice, Cole Barron, evidently he fired the state's Bureau of Public Health Commissioner, this woman named Kathy Slemp. Evidently, he doubted the numbers. He doubted the accuracy of the number of coronavirus cases. Didn't like the fact that she was saying, hey, we got some problems here. Hello, Justice, we've got problems. He didn't like that, sending the wrong message, fired her. Why? Well, because she was putting out the facts. And I guess, in this world of alternative facts, and this is the scary thing that Trump has brought us, that there are no more universal facts. There are no more honest truths. We can no longer look at a test and go, yeah, he tested positive. Evidently, we can't do that anymore. Because if you look at the reporting of deaths in places like Florida and Texas, for the months while New York was reporting really high COVID deaths, Florida and Texas were just calling them pneumonia. So historically, you have under 1,000 people die for those months of pneumonia, whereas this last flu season, this last couple of months, it was like 5,000 a month. But hey, just nothing to see here. It's still pneumonia. It's our facts. So think about that for a second. I mean, these are the people who are telling you, don't wear a mask, go out, you don't need this. We need to reopen. We need freedom. And this is the weird thing, because now wearing a mask has become a political statement. Or not wearing it has become a political statement as well. And I looked at this state representative in Ohio, a guy named John Cross, who put out a statement on Facebook saying why he doesn't wear a mask. He said that, one, the General Assembly of Ohio did not pass any law to make masks mandatory for Ohioans, nor with any unconstitutional health orders. 2, it's his right not to wear a mask. And 3, I do not support a government that tries to quarantine the healthy. He goes on to say that he's a proud conservative Republican who will fight for our rights and our freedoms and defend the Constitution and basically defend his right to do whatever the hell he wants at your expense. And this is one of those moments, and I have these conversations with people who, why are you wearing a mask? Well, in this setting, to protect you, because it's not my right to get you sick. And you have these conservatives who believe that it's their right to do whatever, break whatever, infect whatever, whoever, however, because it's their God-given right. And I look at someone like, here in Pennsylvania, we've got deranged Daryl Metcalf, who's a kook to begin with. But on the mask issue, again, you're just bizarre. Uh, Again, going to crazy town, if you will. He went on this rant about how when he was in the military, they used to force them to wear masks because it was part of warfare. They trained for nuclear and biological and chemical warfare, and they were required, as a matter of they had to put on masks, and they couldn't take them off if they were told so. And that's because they were in the military and they had no rights. That was, how did he put it? I gave up some of my rights so I could defend yours. And then he goes on this rant about, the people who are saying we should wear masks are the people who say that, my body, my choice. So he's going after the abortion people. And again, you conflate these two issues. You go, but hold on. Wait a second. Just a thought here, Daryl. Little help, if you will. Very, very different scenarios. I didn't do anything to someone else. I didn't walk by someone and get them pregnant. You could walk by someone and get them sick. If we are in a world where you can walk by somebody and get them pregnant, well, we're going to have a population explosion. That's going to be a problem. But that would be a really tough question, don't you think, Daryl? And if you think this whole point is kind of crazy, I do too. I don't see how Daryl brought this in, but it's his opportunity to go after the pro-choice folks without really getting the fact that he's being a complete and total doofus. And the thing is the right wing is full of these folks, propped up by a right-wing media structure that emboldens this kind of toxicity of people like Cross or people like Metcalf, who, under the guise of fighting for freedom or fighting against political correctness, are really just pushing stupidity. And, it's this, it's stupidity. It's just louder. I mean, they're not fighting for your freedom. What freedom is it that someone should be able to go down the street and get you sick? Where's the freedom in that? I know it's their freedom, but what about yours? And this is where, I go back to Justice Hugo Black, who said, you can swing your fists around all you want until it touches the tip of my nose. You have the right to do what you want until your rights infringe upon mine. And this is a conversation that I thought was well over. I thought as a country we had this grasp. We got it. But sadly, we've got a right-wing media infrastructure in this country that panders to the mildly educated, panders to the angry, panders to the mouth-breathing idiot base who just want to be against things. They just want to break things and be against things because basically they're unhappy. So if someone's telling them to act in a way that makes sense to protect not just themselves, but everybody else, they're against it. And as I said from the beginning, you can't get these people to come around without severe penalties because they don't care about you. They don't care about me. Hell, they don't even care about themselves. And this is the thing. I walked into Target today. And, there's a big sign right there at the door. You cannot enter without a mask. So, my daughter and I, we've got ours on. We walk in, we got what we had to get. And literally, half of the people that walked in read the sign, walked right on by it in kind of a defiant, screw you, I'm not going to do it. Walked right up to a worker, right up to her within, 6-8 inches of this person and asking questions. And the worker's like, whoa, backing up, and this person's just following them. No interest of this person's safety or their health whatsoever. And you wonder why things are spiking. I got to tell you, I think it's going to have to come to a point to where when one of these Karens or Kens start doing this, someone's going to have to punch them in the nose. Maybe that's where we have to go. No mask, pop in the mouth. Maybe that's it. Maybe you're going to start seeing people shoot each other over not wearing a mask. I don't know. But it's really just insane that you have these people who really don't care about others. Love to hear your thoughts. Have you experienced this while out in the real world? I'd love to hear it. You can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, a new movie out, Mr. Jones. I highly suggest taking a look at it when we come back. Andrea Chalupa is going to be here to share her thoughts on her movie, Mr. Jones. Quick break, right back.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1943. That was the day the Smith-Conley War Labor Disputes Act was passed. In the years before Taft-Hartley, it was considered the foremost slave labor bill. It gave the president the power to seize and operate war industries confronted with strikes or lockouts interfering with war production. It also criminalized any future strikes in seized plants with $5,000 fines and up to a year in prison. And it held unions in war-related industries liable for damages incurred if they failed to give 30-day strike notices. The law was passed just 4 days after miners struck in protest of a War Labor Board decision that denied all of their contract demands. Congress overrode President Roosevelt's veto in passing the act. But critics argued that FDR vetoed the bill over parts that did not go far enough to suppress strikes. President Roosevelt argued for a proposed amendment that would, quote, enable us to induct into military service all persons who engage in strikes, stoppages, or other interruptions of work in plants in possession of the United States. The bill effectively criminalized any worker that dared to defy the wartime no-strike pledge, even as wages and working conditions quickly deteriorated in the face of massive defense industry profits. Miners were outraged by threats of conscription and jail time if they dared to strike. United Mine Worker President John L. Lewis refused to comment on the act, but other United Mine Worker leaders lamented that the bill would hurt AFL and CIO unions. As far as the United Mine Workers were concerned, though, the bill wasn't worth the paper it was written on. The act expired in June of 1947. It was superseded by the detested Taft-Hartley Act. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, we're really in an interesting time in that, almost what we see coming out of our media, a lot of people question. I mean, I look at Donald Trump, nothing I hear coming out of his mouth, I believe. There's an entire media structure built around ensuring that whatever he says is reverberated and sworn to. And we like to think that, the good old days were so much better. They weren't. Things were just as complicated, probably even more so. And much more deadly, which is why when I saw this film that has just come out, Mr. Jones, about a young Welsh journalist who travels to the Ukraine back in 1933 to see the famine and the horrible tragedy that is that scenario. I go, this is a perfect moment for our time. That's why I've asked Andrea Chalupa to come talk with us. She, I guess, wrote this incredible movie, which I highly suggest. But she's also a journalist, the author of Orwell and the Refugees, co-host of Gaslit Nation, and now movie mogul. Andrea, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me, Rick. How are you?
I am good. Congratulations on the movie. The things I've seen, reviews really, really good. I guess, France, it's #1 at the box office?
We found out today it's Mr. Jones, which is called The Shadow of Stalin in France, in French, L'Ombre de Staline. It is #1 at the box office for new films newly released in France. It's in hundreds of theaters across France. It's in most countries around the world, in most markets, from, Japan, South Korea, India, the Middle East, across Europe, and it just opened in North America. It was supposed to be in theaters, but Donald Trump failed to stop a global pandemic. Obama did not have that problem. He took care of preventing an Ebola pandemic, but Donald Trump is the exact opposite of Obama in a million different ways. And so here we are. No theatrical release for Mr. Jones, but you can watch it now on Amazon, iTunes, and video on demand on cable.
Yeah, I bought it and I will watch it again. It was gripping, as I was, and it was an opportunity to have a conversation with my kids who, the imagery, and I'll tell you, shocking. A lot of it was, even for me, I was stopped in my tracks as I was watching it going, wow, that's powerful.
Thank you so much. Well, it's based on over 14 years of research into Stalin's genocide famine in Ukraine, which deliberately mass murdered millions of people, the vast majority Ukrainian. This was considered one of the worst atrocities under Stalin, and that, of course, is saying a lot. He's responsible for countless deaths during his reign of terror. And most people don't know about this famine because the Western media, namely the New York Times, was extremely good at covering it up. And Western governments wanted to make money in helping Stalin modernize his Soviet empire, so they turned a blind eye as well. So it's a classic story of Western corruption, Western greed, helping dictators get away with mass murder.
Yeah, and I had the conversation with my daughter because she sat down and watched it with me, and it was one of these, kind of a world that they have my kids have no idea of what the dynamics were of World War II or the Cold War or U.S. and Russia policy or any of this, and for them, my youngest daughter was like, well, why was this like this? Why is this like this? And I think it's an excellent piece to open up those conversations because there are a lot of dilemmas in there and a lot of choices of conscience that Mr. Jones has to make.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's the story of a real-life young Welsh journalist, as you said, who risked his life and his career to sneak inside Ukraine when it was forbidden and blow the lid off this thing and to be a whistleblower and alert the world that Stalin was doing this. And even though he's ultimately murdered in suspicious circumstances, some research suggests by the Soviet secret police, his work lives on in George Orwell's Animal Farm. And we show that in the film. You see George Orwell as a character in the film, played by the great British actor Joseph Mawle, who, if you watched Game of Thrones, Joseph was Uncle Benjen in Game of Thrones, who saved Jon Snow. And so Joseph is an extraordinary actor, and he brings George Orwell to life as sort of the narrator of this dark fairy tale where you see the words of Animal Farm being written by George Orwell, and that narrates this young man, Mr. Jones's journey to get the truth out into the world.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I highly suggest it, but, I guess the question I kept coming back to is, how did you get into this? Why is this, you said you spent 14 years researching it, why is this at the front of your mind?
So do you know that scene when Gareth is in Ukraine, the scene in the film where he has his camera and he's about to take a picture because he sees a horse wagon.
Yeah, picking up the bodies, and especially the child, because that's
exactly.
that one scene. If I can cut you off real quick, that one scene is what made my youngest daughter get up and leave the room.
Oh my God! Really?
Because she saw the mother's body being thrown up on the cart. The mother's dead, and it was the child still wrapped up, crying for its mother, that they similarly threw up on the cart as well and just moved on down the road. And it kind of gave that feeling like, oh, that kid's going to be dead soon too anyway.
Right. So that scene of the body collector coming and collecting the dead body of the mother and her still living child and just throwing it in the back of his wagon like trash with the other bodies, that scene was taken directly from my grandfather's memoir. My grandfather witnessed that as a young man, barely surviving through Stalin's genocide famine himself with his family. And my grandfather wasn't a writer, but before he passed away, he wrote down his life story of everything, all the horrendous events that he had witnessed growing up in Ukraine, from the Russian Revolution to Stalin's genocide famine to being arrested as a young father himself during Stalin's purges and being tortured and kept in prison, to barely escaping being hunted down by the Soviet secret police and murdered because the Nazis were invading, and the Soviets were mass murdering political prisoners like him. And so he barely escaped. He finally got out of Ukraine to the hell of World War II. But all of the events that my grandfather wrote about in his memoir, those are the events that Orwell allegorized in Animal Farm. So my grandfather lived Animal Farm. And so this whole story, this whole film, this passion project that I've dedicated so many years to, that was for my grandfather. He was the world to me growing up. He used to take me to get donuts and hot chocolate and go play in the park. And so when I got older and I understood what he had survived and what kind of hard life that he had, I was shocked, and I wanted to pay tribute to him and the countless millions whose names we'll never know who suffered so greatly, and just to give them some justice in the world and just to force some accountability by exposing all the people, the big powerful forces that thought they can get away with this, and just to warn all of us of how essential it is for us to fight for human rights. There are no small battles for human rights and equality, and we cannot turn a blind eye to injustice anywhere, because this stuff adds up over time, and pretty soon we become numb to it and we normalize it. And that's a lot of what went on in this era of the early 1930s. That's why this movie feels so current today.
Yeah, no, I mean, there was just so many things in it that struck me, and one of it, the poem that the kids, or the children's rhyme, or whatever the kids were chanting,
Right.
is that an actual child's chant that?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. Yeah, that was taken. So the chant of the children's thing, in a very surreal scene, that was taken from a brilliant book on this period by Timothy Snyder, the great historian at Yale University, who wrote. It was taken from his book, Bloodlands: Europe Between Hitler and Stalin, how those two mass murderers influenced each other. So that those words, all of that was a song from that period. People would it was considered subversive, of course, but a lot of what happened in Stalin's terror and Stalin's genocide famine, people weren't even allowed to mourn their dead. They part of the massive crime they were under. Part of this crime against humanity was also the gaslighting. They weren't allowed to acknowledge what was being done to them, that they were being their food was systematically taken away, and they were left to starve to death. The borders of Ukraine sealed. They weren't allowed to leave. They weren't allowed to go to the cities to beg for food. Children were rounded up and kept. Orphans were rounded up and kept in basements where they starved to death. All of that was denied. You couldn't say what you saw, and so as a result, we got some subversive art and poetry that survived from that period, because culture has a way of passing down what happened. Art has a way, art is so powerful. Art is so important because it has a way of survivors sharing what happened. And so, and it is an example of that. This song that you hear in the film survived, and it was a testament to what people had lived through.
No, it was incredible, and it was eerie, and and again, it was another one of those moments where my daughter was like, "Oh, why don't they just leave?" And then trying to explain to them that
they can't leave. Yeah,
trying to explain that
prison. They're in prison, basically.
Right, that they're imprisoned in their country, and that's how the Soviet Union was.
Yeah.
Because it was interesting, and you started this at the beginning with Mr. Jones basically saying, it's miraculous what Stalin is doing. It's the increase in factories, increase in automobile production, increase in all these things. It's incredible, and it gave the sense that he went into this thinking that Stalin actually was doing something incredible, and then at this moment has his eyes open, pretty much the time when he ate the dead person.
Right, exactly. I mean, so the director of the film, Agnieszka Holland, she is a phenomenal director. She directed The Secret Garden, that beautiful children's book. She directed a lot of episodes of The Wire, House of Cards, The Affair. She did a number of iconic Holocaust films like Europa, Europa, and In Darkness. She grew up in Soviet-occupied Poland. Both her parents were journalists. Her father's official cause of death was suicide while under police interrogation. And to her, this was a deeply personal story to get the truth out and to bring healing to the countless people, the countless millions that suffered under Soviet repression. And for her, she wanted to call the film initially Human Farm, because that's what it was like. They treated it was in a totalitarian state. The people are just crushed. They're treated like manure to make money for the regime. They don't care. They'll liquidate masses of people. They'll commit multiple genocides. Stalin committed several genocides during his reign of terror. So Agnieszka, that was one of the titles that she had in mind for Mr. Jones was Human Farm, but we ultimately didn't go with it because it sounded almost like sci-fi. But there is a scene in the film, which you might remember, where the Soviets and the American capitalists have a big dinner in the Waldorf Astoria, and they're celebrating this newfound friendship where they're going to open up diplomatic ties. That really did happen. And during that scene, you show the fanciness of this fancy world of the elite from the Kremlin and the elite from Washington, D.C. together in a room. And as you see them celebrating their new union, people, the hyper-capitalists and the totalitarian Soviets, it's all human farm. It's
right.
all just repressive policies that make money off the expense of innocent lives. Clearly, the Soviets did this to a far greater extreme than the Americans ever have, and that's fact. That is fact. But it just goes to show that the Soviets could not have gotten away with this if it wasn't for corruption in the West and apathy and indifference and conformity.
And let's not forget greed.
Right.
So, the questions I have is, why now? I mean, this is a perfectly timed movie, and talking about a whole bunch of themes of democracy, of human rights, of media bias, of all of those things. What are you hoping people take from it?
Well, I think people have to remember that history is a mirror. History is a mirror, and we must confront our darkest demons today because it's all. How do I say this? So I want to start with Germany. Germany right now under Angela Merkel is the leader of the free world right now, and Germany has been able to be resistant to the authoritarian threat, to the far-right threat coming back in Germany. And the reason why I believe one of the reasons why they've been resistant to it is because Germany has done a very good job at confronting the dark chapters of its history. And I'm talking, of course, of the Nazi regime.
Right.
Germany has put that front and center and try to heal from it and confront it and understand it. And I think history is healing. Confronting the dark chapters of our history, it's healing and it's protection. A nation that knows its past protects its future. Look at America. We have two Americas because we've never done that work when it came to slavery and the Civil War, and now we're being forced to do it, and we must do it fully and successfully so we can have a freer future and strengthen our democracy. So I just want everyone to take from this film that history is healing. Confronting these dark chapters of history is healing and necessary. A nation that knows its past protects its future. And if more Americans in 2016 knew of Russia's history, of vicious imperialism and what it was like, they would have taken all the warnings from Hillary Clinton and others that the Kremlin was attacking us. Like, I took that very seriously, and I was called all sorts of names for doing that. But I took it seriously because I understood the history. History is a warning.
And I hope people will take a look at the film. I found it incredible. And there, I guess the only place I was able to find it was on Amazon. Are there other places?
Yeah, so iTunes, cable on demand, but Amazon seems to be, the most reliable. But yeah, but it's out, and I'm really proud of it. I'm really proud of it, all the work that people put into it, and the cast and acting across the board is extraordinary. And I'm very grateful to everybody that worked so hard to finally bring this film to light.
No, it was incredible, and you should be proud of it. You guys did an incredible job, and fortunately, we bought it. We can watch it again and again.
Oh, Rick, you're so kind.
It's good stuff. Andrea, I appreciate the time. Keep up the great work. I'd love to have you back again real soon.
Absolutely. Best to you all. Take care. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Again, the movie Mr. Jones, you can get it on Amazon. I wish there were more places because I hate Amazon. But great stuff. I highly, highly suggest it. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1893. That was the day that the Haymarket Martyrs Monument was dedicated at what is now the Forest Home Cemetery just west of Chicago. The Haymarket Martyrs were 8 men convicted of throwing a bomb at a workers' rally in Chicago during the 1886 fight for the 8-hour day. The men were sentenced, although the prosecution had no evidence specifically tying these 8 men to the bomb. Some of them were not even present at the time of the explosion. 4 of the men were hung, 1 died in prison, and 3 were still incarcerated at the time of the monument's dedication. Lucy Parsons, the widow of martyr Albert Parsons, led the statue effort with the support of the Pioneer Aid and Support Association. The monument was designed by sculptor Albert Wienert. It includes 2 bronze figures, a woman depicting justice holding a fallen worker. At the base of the statue are inscribed the last words of one of the martyrs, August Spies. The day will come when our silence will be more powerful than the voice you are throttling today. The dedication of the monument was timed to coincide with the World's Columbian Exposition taking place in Chicago. Thousands of workers marched or took a train to the outskirts of the city to attend the ceremony. Today, the monument stands as one of the most sacred sites of labor. Many other labor and social justice activists are buried or have monuments near the statue. Today, the Illinois Labor History Society maintains the monument. Each year, visitors from around the world come to the cemetery to pay homage to the workers who gave their lives for the cause of labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we've been talking about the last couple of days, you've got this Martha McSally bill, the American Trip Act, that will, if passed, and I don't see it actually passing, but if passed, would give rich people who are going to go on vacation anyway a tax credit. We're basically going to pay for rich people to take their kids on vacation, while most working people in this country don't have the luxury of even paid vacation time, let alone the disposable income to take a vacation that they would then, if this credit goes through, get back at the end of the year. So again, this is another one of those moments where the Republicans have come up with another scheme to enrich the already wildly wealthy while doing very little, if anything, for those at the very bottom. And as I said the other day, take this $50 billion, put it into SNAP, put it into infrastructure, put it into healthcare, put it into education, put it into anything else. Just hand it out to the workers in those industries so that they can feed their families. To me, much better money spent, other than, hey, let's go on vacation and be super spreaders. Probably not the greatest thing to do. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about the SNAP side of this, because I'm a firm believer in, you got to feed people first, especially in this moment. That's why I've asked Arbery Hayter to come talk with us. She's a research assistant with the Poverty to Prosperity program there at the Center for American Progress. They got a piece out now on why Congress has to strengthen the SNAP program, to help those essential workers, those heroes that we put up on the pedestal, but didn't really do much else for. A little praise, maybe a couple of pennies. Arbery, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So, I look at this, and let's start right there. I mean, you've got a bill evidently going through the Senate that's going to, put $50 billion into telling, people who probably are going to be okay anyway through all this, we're going to give you a little extra money to go on vacation, while not extending SNAP benefits. It seems tone deaf at the minimum. It seems cruel and heartless at the other end.
Yeah, and even more, the people who would be serving people who are going on vacation are these exact essential workers who we have no protections for, who are seeing all of the losses during this coronavirus crisis, and who are already really in the most economically precarious situation. And this would really be asking them to take on more risk to serve people who have been protected better and have more resources, and to continue to expose themselves to this virus because they need to make money, they need to be able to feed their families, and they're already having trouble doing that. And many of them were already having trouble even before we were really facing this pandemic.
Yeah, now you guys had put out a piece, I cited it last night on the program, that the people that we're calling essential workers, back in 2018, and I think the number was like almost 13.5% of those quote unquote essential workers qualified for SNAP benefits during 2018. Whereas the people that, stayed home, the non-essential workers, collected at a much lower rate, something like 7.5%, to where you go, again, the folks that we've put up on these pedestals, we've done nothing to help, and they're the ones who end up shouldering the burdens.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're seeing is that 2018 data, which we expect does hold up to the trends of today, we're seeing that essential workers are the workers who are more likely to be relying on public benefits like SNAP. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So part of it is, of course, that unfortunately a lot of who has been deemed essential now are working in roles where employers are able to pay poverty wages. They're in jobs that are more unstable. They're in already low-paid jobs where it's also difficult to get a full schedule. It's difficult to have flexibility. You experience income volatility month to month. Things that make you a lot more likely to, need to rely on a program like SNAP to help feed yourself and your families. And so what we're seeing is that these workers now who have to go to work, a lot of them have relied on these programs even before the pandemic and could even be using them now, right? And I think it really underscores the fact that SNAP is such an essential program, and it doesn't just help people who are out of work, and it doesn't just help people who are both out of work and kind of looking, right? It's also people who are working, and it's for people who are in between jobs, and it really helps everyone. It helps their families. Yeah. And especially in this moment, it's so important that we really work to strengthen that program, because it doesn't just help the people who have lost their jobs and, don't really have anything left and really need it, but it also helps the people that we're all relying on as a country to keep us safe and healthy and fed.
Yeah, the thing that gets me is for years we've done work with the food bank and with homeless organizations, and a number of years back, I met a woman who was working at Burger King, and she she worked there full time, and lived in the shelter at night, and had to collect SNAP benefits, and she was working full time. She was working. Her and her two kids lived in the shelter, and they were collecting SNAP benefits, and still not enough to make ends meet to actually get a place to live. I mean, it was one of these moments where you go, in the wealthiest country in the history of civilization, at its wealthiest moment, we can do better. It's just a matter of policy and a matter of priority. And as a country where you're talking about, spending $50 billion telling people to take a vacation, while you have that woman who's struggling, there just seems something wrong to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really ultimately indictment of the way that this country and the people in power have not made choices that help the most marginalized and the most vulnerable. We have weak labor laws. We rely on poverty wages and allow that to be okay. Like you mentioned, there are people who are working full time and still can't afford to buy food, to have shelter, and to even meet their most basic needs. And it's actually honestly really interesting, because a lot of those industries, so for example, you mentioned like a restaurant worker, a third of essential workers who relied on SNAP were in the food and restaurant industry. And so we're seeing first people in the food and restaurant industry classified often as essential, but we're also seeing more of those workers having to put themselves at risk now, even as states reopen, right? And restaurants are kind of popping up and trying to make patio seating work or whatever is allowed in their states. And a lot of times it's servers, it's cooks who are putting themselves at risk to serve those customers. And that's really who we're seeing also relying on these programs to feed themselves.
Yeah. And again, most of those industries are tipped kind of industries. And you're talking about a minimum wage that's, I think in Pennsylvania it's up to $2.83 an hour. I think the federal minimum wage is still something like $2.19 or some pathetic $2.18, some pathetically low number. So they're dependent on tips, and without having the volume that they used to have, their income is going to be much lower. And good luck with it, enforcing employers to pay the minimum wage that they're supposed to. So again, as you've said, they fall back on these things in these times of crisis to help put food on the table. And we're again not doing enough, in my view, to help them.
Exactly. And we're also seeing disparities in other ways, too. It's not just about industries, right, and occupations, which is what this analysis was specifically looking at, were, what's been classified as essential on more of a federal level, given that states have had a lot of different rules and have been using a lot of different definitions for the past couple of months. But we're also seeing that the essential workers who have used SNAP are disproportionately women and people of color, right? And that's a reflection of the way that systemic inequities are pushing those with the least economic and political power into jobs that are, then underpaid and undervalued. And that unfortunately matches with the trends that we see, knowing that women and people of color are also more likely to be lower paid, are more likely to be vulnerable and to need public benefits often, whether they're working or not, right? And so that is really frustrating to see, and it really parallels a lot of the trends that we're also seeing in who gets impacted most by the coronavirus itself, right? Like where are we seeing fatalities, who is seeing the most impact? And it's not really the highest paid people, it's the lowest paid people, it is the people who are most vulnerable, who have the least options available to them.
Yeah, it's the people who didn't have a choice, had to show up to those meat packing plants, had to show up and work in those nursing homes, had to show up and work at the fast food restaurants or the grocery stores. Again, as you've pointed out, mostly the people that we've been dumping on for generations anyway. So it's not surprising that they're the ones who suffered the brunt of this throughout this. So the question then becomes, how do you change that? Me as a union guy, I keep saying, every worker in this country should join a union. You should fight for better wages, hours, conditions, pull the power of labor and organize to fight organized capital. That's not going to happen overnight. So what do we do?
Right. Unions are great. They're a great longer-term fix, and it's really important that we make sure that there's as much power in the hands of workers as possible. But even with unions and even with employers who aren't paying a poverty wage, even knowing that workers are, getting paid what they're worth, even if all of that were true, we would still need to make sure that SNAP was a really, really strong program. And first, that's because obviously whether you're working or not, you should be able to put food on the table. You should be able to feed your kids. You should be able to feed yourself. And that fact shouldn't be tied to work at all. But it's a safety net program for a reason, right? So if you're being asked to go to work and you don't feel safe doing that, if you don't have anything to fall back on, if you decide that you need to leave your job, or you realize that making a choice that's better for your health and your family's health is going to put your job in danger, and you know that you don't have benefits to fall back on, you can't access SNAP if you lose your job, you don't really get, your unemployment insurance doesn't really do enough for you. If you lose that job, then you're not really able to make a choice in whether you're going to risk your life or not.
Yep.
It's not a choice. And so it's really important that we have these programs available during this time of crisis and beyond, because we need to make sure that people are able to choose working at a job that is safe for them, working at a job where they are treated with dignity. And having a really strong safety net program, including food assistance like SNAP, really makes that choice possible. Which is why for the last couple of months I've been saying what the Democrats need to be pushing forward is a true choice bill. To do exactly what you said, give workers an actual choice on whether they're going to put themselves and their families at risk by going to work, or they stay home and collect unemployment and wait this thing out. Ultimately, what we want is we want people to be safe and not be forced into situations where they're putting themselves and others at risk. And right now, workers don't have a choice in this. Once the boss snaps their fingers and says, come back to work, unemployment benefits end. And people still have hungry kids. People still need to put a roof over their heads. So there isn't really a choice. So I'm glad you brought that up. Sure. And there's also, there are things that we can do also for people who, not just the essential workers who are relying on SNAP, but everyone else as well, right? Even we know that SNAP benefits are not enough. They have not been enough for a very long time. And they are definitely not enough in this moment. And so there are things that we can do that capture everyone, right? It doesn't need to be SNAP legislation targeted towards essential workers only. And that's not what this piece is about. And that's not really what the analysis is about either. But right now we know that there's legislation that makes it so that everyone who is on SNAP should be receiving the maximum amount of SNAP benefits for their household size. But that actually leaves out families that were already receiving the maximum. And so there are analyses that show that this is around 40% of all SNAP recipients who are already at that maximum limit, and they didn't actually see an increase. But they have the maximum amount because they have been deemed to have the maximum need.
And what is the maximum amount, do you know?
Yeah, so it depends on family sizes, and so it kind of differs, but the average SNAP benefits is usually around like $130, but really it comes out to around $1.40 per person per meal.
$1.40 per person per meal.
Yes.
And what can you purchase with that?
Not really a lot. Obviously, people are thrifty and creative and do their best with the money they have, and so people find ways to make it stretch. But that number has been too low for too long. And even before this coronavirus pandemic and resulting economic crisis, advocates were already saying that this is not enough and we need to be increasing it. And so to know that in a moment of dire need, those benefits are still at around that amount, that is really, really, truly pretty cruel, especially knowing that the families that are seeing increases and the households that are seeing increases to their SNAP benefits because of the temporary legislation are not the ones who were already facing the most need. And knowing that that's a little less than half of those recipients, right, around 40%.
Right.
And so there's more that we need to do. I know there's big pushes right now to get at least a 15% increase so that those families that are at the maximum will get 15% more, and that can help out. Having a minimum benefit that goes from $16 to $30, which will really help capture a lot of kind of single households and senior households. And also just to reflect on the fact that the minimum benefit that you can get from SNAP is $16.
It almost sounds like it's not worth going through the paperwork and the hassle to get the $16 a month.
Right. And honestly, for a lot of people, of course, it is. $16 doesn't sound like a lot because it's not a lot, but it can go really far for people who are really, really struggling. And that's really important not to lose sight of. That $16 makes a difference. Changing 16 to 30 makes a difference. And like every dollar does count. But again, we're counting pennies for the people who are poorest while we're giving out billions to people who don't need it.
No, that's an excellent
and that's
point.
really the problem.
No, that's an excellent point. I mean, last question I've got for you. I mean, looking at Martha McSally's bill of $50 billion for people to go on vacation, what would $50 billion do to help feed the nation's poor? Could we raise that bottom number from 14 to 30 bucks? Is it possible would that do a dent in anything that we need to do on the SNAP front?
Oh yeah, I'm sure 50 billion would do a lot for people who are struggling and for people who are hungry. There's a lot of ways that we can make SNAP better, and a big one is spending more money on it. Part of how SNAP is designed is that in times of economic crisis, we should be spending more on it because it's meant to respond to need.
Right.
But we know that it already wasn't enough. We've discussed this already. So if it wasn't already enough and we have skyrocketing need in food insecurity, which so many household surveys have shown, the right thing to do is at a bare minimum, make sure that more people can get that money, and also, thinking more about who is getting those benefits. How do we have cutoffs and how do we determine who's eligible or not for those benefits? Now is a really good time to think about what helps in the crisis, but also thinking longer term, how do we make this work so that we can create an America where no one is hungry?
Yeah, excellent point. The other things I would like to throw in there is we should be raising the threshold. I think it's like 130% of poverty. I think we should jack that up to 200% of poverty at least. And also the other side I think nobody ever really talks about with SNAP benefits is the reverberation effect that it has in the economy. I think the study I saw, for every dollar we spend on SNAP benefit, it adds like a $1.75 to GDP. So it's actually good business outside of, if you need that. If feeding the hungry and helping those less fortunate isn't enough for you, it's also good business.
Right, exactly. If feeding the hungry isn't enough, it's also good for the economy. It's one of the best things that we did during the Great Recession. It's one of the best things that we can do moving forward. And there is a lot to be done with SNAP, that it just requires a kind of political and moral willpower to take it seriously and to prioritize it and to recognize SNAP and safety net programs as part of having a functioning economy that works for everyone. And so I think it's really important that we emphasize that, and it's really important that we prioritize SNAP and we prioritize the poorest, because otherwise we're just going to be making everything worse, and we're going to be creating a situation with inequality that we're not going to be able to bridge.
There you go. Good stuff. I hope people will take a look at the article you guys have got out on Congress on why they must strengthen the SNAP benefit to support essential workers. We'll get links out at thericksmithshow.com and also on social media. I appreciate you taking some time for us. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Right back. Stick around.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Chances are you may never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, inspecting an elevator, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Joe Biden's taking a beating today, evidently during a backyard get-together down in Lancaster. He said that instead of 120,000 people dying from the coronavirus, had a slip of the tongue, said 120 million, to which the Trumpkins went all crazy. In fact, Trump himself and the campaign went all crazy, saying, this is a serious, egregious error. It's not a permissible type of error. And I find it interesting that Trump would open his mouth about this. This is the guy whose his great idea was shoving a light up your behind or drinking bleach. When that's your response to global pandemic, maybe sit down and shut the what up. Just shut up already. Maybe just a thought. Also, if your greatest argument about how we're going to get rid of the coronavirus is to stop testing, maybe just shut up. Just kind of a thought. Cut Biden a little bit of slack. Everyone has made that slip of the tongue. I've done it before where I've said billion instead of million, or I've said trillion instead of billion, or we've done it occasionally. We know what he meant. Here's my problem. The less than dim, they're going to use this as fun fodder. And look, when you're on that stage, you've got to at every moment measure your words and make sure you don't make these easy slip ups, because these are too easy. At the end of the day, I will vote for Joe Biden over Donald Trump any day of the week and twice on Sunday if I were allowed. I'm not, but I would if I could. This is, again, another one of those moments where don't be fooled by the nonsense. Trump's policies put us into this position. How many of those 120,000 people wouldn't be dead had this administration done their job early on? How many of those 120,000 families wouldn't be missing a loved one if this administration did their job from the start? And not even, from the start. At some point in the middle said, you know what, maybe we need to take this social distancing seriously. Maybe we need to take the mask thing seriously. Maybe we need to stop with the bravado and stop with the toxic masculinity and I'm not wearing no stinking mask. And maybe, I don't know, send a more positive message, on a more factual, more scientific message. Kind of a thought. I know, really deep. It's much easier to go, he said 120 million. That's a third of the country. It's easier to do that than to actually think critically and evaluate what this administration has done really horribly. Again, today, another 1.5 million people reported filing for unemployment claims last week. So lots of people struggling, lots of people fighting to survive. And yet this is kind of where the news is. Something wrong with our priorities, I think. And again, this is the Fox News culture. This is what is going to gain the attention of the right-wing conservative media who keep shoveling us this nonsense while people are literally going hungry in our country. And you have a president who clearly, it's all about him, all about his reelection. Sad stuff. But look, hey, was Biden wrong for saying million? Absolutely. He made a mistake. I'm willing to cut him a little slack on that. My Trump supporters, you okay with the guy saying that we just stop testing and it'll all go away? Do you remember when Trump said we've got 15 cases, it's going to go down to 0 really soon? That was before anybody died. So let's not lose sight of the fact that 120,000 people have died under his watch and because of his policies. Little difference in severity. Just a thought. Quick break. Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Many Americans can't believe that political coups are part of our country's history. But consider the Wall Street Putsch of 1933. Never heard of it? It was a corporate conspiracy to oust Franklin Roosevelt, who had just been elected president. With the Great Depression raging and millions of families financially devastated, FDR had launched several economic recovery programs to help people get back on their feet. To pay for this crucial effort, he had the audacity to raise taxes on the wealthy, and this enraged a group of Wall Street multimillionaires. Wailing that their, quote, liberty to grab as much wealth as possible was being shackled, they accused the president of mounting a class war. To pull off their coup, they plotted to enlist a private military force made up of destitute World War I veterans who were upset at not receiving promised federal bonus payments. One of the multimillionaire's lackeys reached out to a well-respected advocate for veterans, retired Marine General Smedley Darlington Butler. They wanted him to lead 500,000 veterans in a march on Washington to force FDR from the White House. But they chose the wrong general. Butler was a patriot and lifelong soldier for democracy who in his later years was critical of corporate war profiteering, and he was repulsed by the hubris and treachery of these Wall Street aristocrats. He reached out to a reporter, and together they gathered proof to take to Congress. A special congressional committee investigated and found Butler's story, quote, alarmingly true, leading to public hearings with Smedley Darlington Butler giving detailed testimony. This is Jim Hightower saying, by exposing the traitors, this courageous patriot nipped their coup d'etat in the bud. But their sense of entitlement reveals that we must beware of the concentrated wealth of the imperious rich, for it poses an ever-present danger to your and my majority rule.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. From Wall Street to Washington, this monthly newsletter reveals who's doing what to whom and why. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, another one of those interesting moments where our fearless leader, dear leader, has decided that his attention needs to be focused on restoring statues. We need to bring back those Confederate general statues to make sure that the ones torn down in D.C. get restored and put right back up, because he's doubling down, man. And in fact, you know, he was all proud of the fact that they sent out unarmed National Guard people to defend all of the statues. And also, I guess, the one of Andrew Jackson at Lafayette Park, he was quite thrilled with that. And the fact that they're going to lock up a bunch of people and they're going for maximum jail time. Because we've got to protect the statues. The hell with those kids who are going hungry. Never mind the people who are dying because of his inaction on the virus. Never mind. The statues are what matters. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top news of the day, our good friend Sarah Burris, reporter over at Raw Story. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello.
We're protecting the statues, Sarah.
You know, it's interesting. The statues don't vote. So I'm curious how this is going to translate into something valuable for the president. But I don't know.
Or do
Maybe
they?
It's a thing.
Or do they?
You know, I would not be surprised if the ghost of Andrew Jackson follows Trump around, and or at the very least, the president thinks that he sees the ghost of Andrew Jackson. That would not surprise me at all. You know, what's interesting is there's really only one Confederate soldier statue outside in Washington, D.C. Granted, Andrew Jackson, who was not necessarily a Confederate soldier, was just a general ass. But the Confederate soldier or the Confederate statue in Washington, the mayor could very easily just say, poof,
be gone
Right.
and get rid of it. So I would not be surprised if that's the route that she takes, and it just sends Trump into clutching his pearls and freaking out, which would be priceless. But the funny thing about so Trump has been talking about this Monuments Act with the statues, and first of all, it's not the Monuments Act. The Monuments Act is actually a Teddy Roosevelt program that he started to save national parks, essentially, to build these amazing national parks all over the country. So it's not the Monuments Act. What I think Trump is actually using to try and save all of these Confederate statues is something called the Veterans Memorial Act, which is supposed to protect statues, monuments, memorials for military members of the United States. Here is my favorite part about all of this. The Confederate statues are not American soldiers.
Right.
Because they were to the Confederacy. So this is going to be like a really fun lawsuit that I'm going to get really nerd out on all the documents, because you cannot protect federal Confederate statues under that veterans law or the Veterans Monument Law. And so it's just like, ooh, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Sarah. This is the weird thing. There are a lot of people who think, well, both sides, they were both Americans. They're both American soldiers. The other day, give you a perfect example of how strange things are. The other day, I saw a pickup truck in front of me with a GOP sticker and the Confederate flag. And, I started thinking about, the party of Lincoln, and must Abraham Lincoln be spinning in his grave that his party that he founded is being flagged right next to the flag that he fought. I mean, it's just this weird kind of moment where, they're rewriting history as we go to fit their narrative of which, Abe Lincoln would be all for the Confederate flag.
Which is hilarious because it really proves that not only are they trying to rewrite history, they don't even know the history that they're rewriting. They're just making up stuff.
Making it up. I shouldn't say rewriting. I should say pulling it out of their behinds.
Yes. Or somebody else's behind, or out of a septic tank, really, that hasn't been cleaned for decades. Really, that's how awful it is. And I feel like these, this is a really good example of Trump trying to find something to fix that he can fix, because nothing else that's going on is something that he can do anything about. He truly is powerless to stop the coronavirus. He can't fix the economy. I mean, all of the things are collapsing around him. And so he's just like trying to grab on to something that he can actually fix. And, even this, it's just like, okay, whatever. If that's what you want to spend all your time working on, then you go do that.
By all means.
The rest of us are going to worry about the election in November.
Defending the legacy of traitors. And the weird thing is you've got other senators, and I look at Rick Scott, the senator from Florida, who did a video today. Well, I guess he was standing in front of an Abraham Lincoln monument, saying, the radical left wants to tear Honest Abe down and rewrite history, and America is the beacon of freedom and hope and all this stuff. And I'm going, you're defending traitors.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's standing in front of the Lincoln statue trying to argue that we should have all of the Confederate generals who fought Lincoln. And so it's like he's using Lincoln to justify Confederate statues, which is so frustrating because it's just like, dude, go back to Florida. I mean, seriously, you guys have like a major COVID problem there. Deal with that. And stop trying to tell me that these Confederate statues are more important than the lives of 122,000 Americans that have died.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I can go off about the Confederate statues, but for real, people are dying. So,
and it's sadly, it's getting worse. And I mean, this is, we had talked about this a while ago that, while the South was basically thumbing their nose at us, we were saying, hey, keep it up. It's going to come your way. Well, we're now in this moment where it's come to fruition. It's spiking
tried
all
to tell
throughout
you.
the South. And like I said at the beginning of the show, the state of Mississippi, it's reported, does not have one single ICU bed available in the entire state.
Oh my gosh, bless their heart. In the genuine sense, not in the sarcastic, Rick Scott, bless your heart way. But for real, like this is, it's not just, I'm still holding up in Oklahoma. I did leave on Wednesday and get a cup of coffee. And I drove around the lake nearby. That was the extent of my excitement for the last week or so. And so I have been locked up since February, and these idiots are just making things even worse because they have decided that they know better than, infectious disease experts and epidemiologists and public health experts. And, the things in Tulsa were going really badly before the Trump rally. He had, I think it's 8 staffers now who have of the advanced team who have COVID.
And a bunch of Secret Service agents that they've quarantined as well.
Yeah, that they've had to quarantine all these Secret Service agents. So you're taking Secret Service agents out of the field. These people who came to Tulsa a week ago, when we were really having like the highest spikes that we have had. So it doesn't surprise me that these people wandered around with no masks on and are just like, oh, I got the COVID, surprise. And now things are getting worse. I don't think necessarily because, if things were bad before the Trump rally, things were going the wrong way before the Trump rally.
Right.
So I will be curious to see how things are on Saturday and how things are next Saturday, because we're already setting, new records. It's like every other day we have a new record, and Texas is the same way. Arizona is the same way. Everybody's setting new records, and it's horrifying. And it's all because people were like, oh, we can reopen. Everything is fine. Well, turns out it's not fine.
Is this what winning looks like?
Yeah, right? Like, this is what happens whenever people think that we're doing great. And they're just not. These are governors who don't listen to science. And they've tried to cover things up. So, Florida, they're going to send all these Republicans to Florida for this giant convention when COVID is raging. I just feel like, people, you would want to save your voters, right?
No, I say good, go. Again, I come back to the reality of go. Good luck. Stay away from the rest of us. And there's part of me goes, maybe the only way we get through this is we allow the herd to thin itself.
It's like putting bleach in the gene pool. And I hate the idea of, endangering all of the people who are going to have to work at this convention. That thing is really scary. But, all these Republicans, if you want to show up and be together and share the COVID and swap some spit, then lick those doorknobs all you want. Have fun. Tally-ho.
And we're not going to wear a stinking mask in the whole crowd.
Which is just absurd. Like, Trump even has Trump-branded masks. They're American flag masks. Like, you can show your patriotism. You could even do a Confederate flag. You could show that you're super heterosexual just to show off what a man you are and all of the things that you want on your stupid little mask. I'm going to hide under the bed, but do your thing.
It just dawned on me that I can't believe Trump didn't jump on the mask thing earlier. I can't believe I didn't think of this. This was a great way to put money in his pocket, the Trump mask. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know why I didn't think of this before.
He made the Trump Sharpies. He made the Trump straws. He's had like 70 different hat versions, a ton of different T-shirts. Why he didn't make like a whole variety? You could have days of the week masks if you wanted from Trump. Like, there are so many options that he could have used to profit off of this. But instead, I think he really was focusing on, oh crap, if I put on a mask, people are going to see that I have a whole bunch of makeup on. And
is it that simple? Do you think that's it?
I think that's got to be it. I mean, sometimes too, if you have a smaller mask, it sort of makes your chin look a little bit like.
I was thinking bad breath.
So
I was thinking he didn't want to smell his own bad breath.
maybe.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be. I think I don't know. I don't know what kind of if he has like a good brushing habit, but either way, like I didn't really think that the makeup thing was that big of a deal until I saw that picture of him coming back from Oklahoma with the tie undone and holding his hat in his hand. If you zoom in on that, you can see the makeup on his collar. It's really, really bad. It's really, really bad. It's like, oh, damn.
It's a lot of work to look that orange.
It is, and it's a lot to get that out of the shirt, let me tell you, because I spilled some makeup on my favorite white dress like years ago, and it took forever to get it out, and nothing was going to work. So, you know, I pity the laundry person at the White House.
Yeah, that's why I'm anti-makeup. I just think it's a waste. I know women like it.
I think you would look out. I think you'd look great with like some extra eyelashes,
No,
or maybe
I can't do it.
Right?
Can't do
maybe
it.
like you could do a little beauty mark or something on your lip, on your upper lip.
My daughters keep wanting to paint my toenails. That ain't happening either. So, hey, if that's your thing, bless you on that. Let's move along. Evidently, the court has not ruled in favor of Trump having the book by Mary Trump blocked. Thoughts?
I'm curious to see how this is going to go because I don't know what her NDA says. I don't know what they're going to throw at her, but I think it's going to be a lot. Like, it's not just Trump, it's his brother Robert is also working with him on this, and it's got to be bad. It's going to be bad. I am more excited about her book than I have ever been about John Bolton's book because we knew what was in Bolton's book.
Right.
And nobody wants to give that asshat any money. I'll give Mary Trump some money, like she's the only family member left who's willing to throw him under the bus. So I say, how can I help? And I'm excited. Her book comes out, I think, in August. So, a good couple of months closer to the election, and we'll see how this goes.
Now the wheels are spinning because I've got to think of if there's a way that I can get her on the program. Because evidently I'm getting John Bolton here the 1st of July. I'm going to get a couple of minutes with him to ask. The only question I've got is, what are you planning for prison? That's supposed to happen.
Oh my gosh, I have so many questions for him. I have so many questions.
I do too, and I only get 10 minutes, but I'm going to try and pack in what I can.
Well, one of the things that he said on the ABC interview on Sunday was that he truly doesn't believe that anything that he would have said would have changed what Republicans on the Hill felt about Donald Trump. I really kind of want him to expand on that. I agree with him, actually. I don't think that I think Republicans have made their bed. They've sold their soul. They've Fisher cut bait. I'm trying to find how many cliches I can throw, but
sure.
I believe it. I think he's right on. I want him to expound on that further about I want him to talk about what is going on in the Senate and why, how he believes the Republican Party has lost themselves this far. When did he start seeing this shift between ideological Republicans and this whole world of Trump worship? Did he see it throughout the course of the Trump administration, or was this something that he was paying attention to ahead of time? Because it seems like he genuinely thought, oh, everything will be fine. Like Trump is crazy, but there will be people that fix this, and maybe he's not that nuts or whatever. I believe him that he thought, oh, this is not going to be that bad.
Yeah, and I believe that he thought, right. I believe that he thought that Trump would actually listen to his counsel.
Yeah, I think he did too, and I think
wrong.
He was woefully unprepared for that. But I'm curious how that really factors into what he thinks about the evolution of the Republican Party and how, they have gone from whether they're war hawks or not, to being Trump worshipers. And that agenda is more important than the GOP agenda.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that I would want to get into with him, but I get 10 minutes. That's it. So outside of what kind of toothpaste are you taking to jail, I'm still formulating my line of questioning. Because look, if Trump wins, because Bolton has said he's not going to vote for Biden, he's not going to vote for Trump either. And so, who the hell are you going to vote for? You better vote for Biden, because if Trump gets reelected, you're going to prison, buddy.
Yeah, that's definitely for sure. He votes in Maryland, he said, so it's not going to matter who he votes for, because Maryland's going to be a blue state. So he thinks he's going to write in something which I think will pretty much nullify his ballot being even remotely useful, but whatever. So, this is going to be crazy.
No, and this is
watching
the thing.
That happen.
I mean, we're only 131 days away from Election Day. And things are obviously going to heat up. The big story today, I'm sure you've seen, is Joe Biden's slip. He said 120 million when he should have said 120,000. And the right is just running with it as you would expect.
Which is really surprising to me, because it's like, there are so many things that Trump has said or done, and they're really grasping at straws here. They're trying so hard to come up with something, and it's just not working. One of my favorite things that I learned this week is there was a guy on MSNBC who was talking about merchandise being sold at Trump rallies.
Right.
Given the fact that there are now Trump rallies and there is this, young Republican conservative Trumpy convention in Arizona over the weekend. There's always a ton of merchandise.
Sure. Drive up and down roads here where I live, and there are a bunch of people on the side of the roads hawking stuff.
Yeah, totally. So a lot of the stuff that they are selling that's anti-democratic is anti-Hillary stuff. And the reason for that is apparently the anti-Biden stuff won't sell. Nobody buys it.
No.
And that is really surprising. I mean, I think I understand, obviously we all understand how hated the Clintons are, but this idea that people don't hate Joe Biden. They don't want to hate on him. They think he's fine. He seems like a very nice man, old, but a very nice man. And so it's just really surprising to me that, this is kind of one of those benchmarks that you're like, whoa. So Trump really can't run the style of campaign that he did with Hillary Clinton, making up all these conspiracy theories and saying really terrible things about him and leading chants and all of these things. And it sort of happened, in Tulsa a little bit, where when he tried to crap on Biden, and it didn't really, the stuff doesn't land.
Yeah. Because I think you hit it right on the head right at the beginning. He's a man. I think, again, the Hillary stuff was, the misogyny was, front and center. And you can't have a chant of lock him up because, people are going to go, well, which him? Just kind of throwing that out there.
Well, I think too. I mean, obviously the fact that he's a white guy makes things a little bit easier on folks because he looks like a good old boy. And the fact that he's got a black best friend, is helping him with the black vote. So,
yeah, especially now. Even though Biden was my fifth choice, I'm still voting for him. It doesn't matter if he said 120 million or 120 trillion for that matter. I don't care how badly he screwed up the number. I think if he were president, we wouldn't have 120,000 people dead. We would have responded to this in a much better fashion, and far fewer people would have lost their lives from the beginning. So arguing over million or thousand or whatever word was used, to me, doesn't amount to very much. If your actions would have prevented even the smaller number from dying.
Yeah, 122,000 Americans have died. 2.4 million people in the United States have had COVID. 2.4 million. That's getting close to the population of some states.
Yeah, well, look,
at that point.
The head of the CDC, the director of the CDC today came out and said he actually believes it could be as high as 10 times higher than that number, upwards of 20 million people across the country. And the thing is there's so much we don't know, and there's so much that We don't know because the leadership is so badly skewed. And tomorrow, evidently, Mike Pence is going to come out and give, the first briefing that they've done or the first meeting of the task force in a couple of months, and his first time leading the meeting because Trump wants to get the hell away from this.
Yeah, and it surprises me that that Trump's not going to be at this because he really likes the camera and he doesn't like it when other people have the spotlight. So how is this really going to happen? Is Pence really going to be the focus, or is Trump going to walk in on this thing and then try and, give his talking points about how it doesn't really exist and the virus is going down? Already, whatever the hell Pence is going to say, I can promise you it's going to be crap. Because earlier this week, whenever he met with members on Capitol Hill, he was saying, oh, it's really just increasing in like 3 major counties or in 3 counties across the country. Well, if the county has 2 million people in it, that's a problem. If you're talking about Houston and them running out of ICU beds, that's not the same as some random county in Wyoming that has 10 people and 1,000 cows in it.
Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, for real. And so I'm concerned that Pence either doesn't know the situation, is lying about it, or downplaying it, or what the hell is going on. But I don't trust whatever he's going to say.
I'm right there with you. And look, if you remember, Trump said from the beginning, there are only 15 cases and soon it'll be down to 0. That was over 122,000 deaths ago. That was in a moment where there were none. And had he taken it seriously at that moment, we probably wouldn't be here at this moment. I hold him responsible for this entire thing. And 131 days can't come fast enough so I can vote to have him ousted from office. That's simple. Finally, Jack Abramoff back in the news, and I guess going back to jail.
We'll see how long that lasts, because you remember last time he was supposed to be in for like 5 years and he only served like 43 months. And given the fact that he's a white-collar criminal and there's the COVID thing, I'm surprised that they're not just sticking an ankle monitor on him and telling him to go play at his summer home or something. But yeah, he turns out Jack Abramoff, the Republican lobbyist who broke all of these laws in the early 2000s, now has broken all of these laws in 2020 and is going to jail for 6 years, 5 or 6 years now, which, who knows if that'll really happen. But sometimes you kind of feel like, we're in a recession, the Abramoff thing, like, I feel like we're going back in time. Like, this is very 2008. Yeah.
It's feeling of the bad old days. And in fact, in February, the country went into a recession. There's still unemployment numbers going up. We're really heading in the wrong direction. And not just heading, it's almost like a terminal velocity free fall into the wrong direction, which again, 131 days till election day.
But make America great again.
There you go. Sarah, I appreciate the time. As always, fantastic stuff. Stay safe. We can't wait till next week.
Yes, stay safe, be well, be careful, wash your hands.
Yeah, you back at you. And wear your mask. Our good friend Sarah Burris, reporter over at Raw Story. Make sure you check out her work. They do fantastic work there and keep you up to date, informed, as well as entertained. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1943. That was the day the Smith-Conley War Labor Disputes Act was passed. In the years before Taft-Hartley, it was considered the foremost slave labor bill. It gave the president the power to seize and operate war industries confronted with strikes or lockouts interfering with war production. It also criminalized any future strikes in seized plants with $5,000 fines and up to a year in prison. And it held unions in war-related related industries liable for damages incurred if they failed to give 30-day strike notices. The law was passed just 4 days after miners struck in protest of a War Labor Board decision that denied all of their contract demands. Congress overrode President Roosevelt's veto in passing the act. But critics argued that FDR vetoed the bill over parts that did not go far enough to suppress strikes. President Roosevelt argued for a proposed amendment that would, quote, enable us to induct into military service all persons who engage in strikes, stoppages, or other interruptions of work in plants in possession of the United States. The bill effectively criminalized any worker that dared to defy the wartime no-strike pledge, even as wages and working conditions quickly deteriorated in the face of massive defense industry profits. Miners were outraged by threats of conscription and jail time if they dared to strike. United Mine Worker President John L. Lewis refused to comment on the act, but other United Mine Worker leaders lamented that the bill would hurt AFL and CIO unions. As far as the United Mine Workers were concerned, though, the bill wasn't worth the paper it was written on. The act expired in June of 1947. It was superseded by the detested Taft-Hartley Act. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So here's another one of those moments where the Trump administration, again, screwing average, everyday working people. Evidently, billionaire Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education, is moving forward with issuing a ruling that would make public schools share a larger portion of the funding that they get to fight the coronavirus to private schools. And the example they gave is in Louisiana. The private schools there are estimated to get at least 267% more funding under the formula that Betsy DeVos has put forward than they would have the way it normally was. And in fact, the state's Orleans parish would get at least 77% of its relief allotment going to the private schools. So again, this is, as I've been talking about for a while, another one of those examples where the schools are ending up getting just screwed over, and they're using the good crisis to make it happen. Sad stuff. Anyway, here to give us some thoughts on, the spiking in the South, how we protect ourselves, and, if we should be wearing those damn masks. I've asked our good friend Kelly Senholz to come talk with us. She is one of the co-founders of the Masks Now movement. Kelly, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm getting this all the time from people who don't want to wear the masks. Evidently, there's a claim out there, and I wanted to get your thought as the expert in this. There's a claim out there that there is a card that people can get that exempts them from wearing a face mask because under the Americans with Disability Act, wearing a mask puts their health at risk. And I'm curious, are there any conditions where wearing a mask and covering your mouth somehow puts you at risk of other diseases?
It's really funny you bring this up because somebody just sent me that list not 5 minutes ago. And, it's like severe anxiety, ADHD, severe respiratory. I mean, there are probably people in the world who wearing a mask would be a problem. But why would you fight wearing a mask? That's the question we should be asking. Why would you want to put your neighbors and your family and your friends at risk for a disease that could kill them? I think that is becoming more and more clear as we move along. I think some of the logic is beginning to sink in as day after day we're on lockdown. It's not getting better. It's not getting better. And now we're having a rise in cases. So, one by one, they're starting to figure out that maybe they should just wear a mask. We're going to have to talk to them all one by one, millions, you and I.
Yeah. No, I mean, the sad thing is, I had someone say, well, I'm not going to, die of hypoxia. Someone told them that hypoxia is a thing that face masks can kill them with. And another person told me, well, you're just wearing that Petri dish on your face, all those germs. And I go, okay, well, let's take that germ idea to the next level. Let's say that Petri dish that I have in my face of my germs coming out, do you want them on you? So by me wearing this damn mask, I'm actually protecting you from it. I'd like you to do the same in kind, please.
Right on. Just be nice. Just be nice. We need bumper stickers. Just be nice. Wear a mask. It's the enthusiasm. It's the Trump charisma that has them all jazzed up about this. The surrounding people on Fox News and Rush Limbaugh that get them all jazzed up. And so they believe they have a story, but when you start talking to them, the story falls apart pretty quickly. They cannot justify killing their grandmother. Speaking of which, just today I got a story in Carrollton, Texas, which is the northern suburb of Dallas. A family of 18 people got infected at one little short birthday party. They wanted to have a little celebration. They made it, very short. They tried to do a little separation, but apparently somebody there had the virus, and just about everybody in their family got it. Grandma and Grandpa, who are like 90 years old, I heard he is going on the ventilator. She's doing better, but obviously when you get COVID at the age of 90, it's not that great.
Right.
And one of the family members had cancer. And I think this is the kind of story we're going to start to hear over and over, where people try to just sidestep the rules a little bit and boom, their whole family is sick. When people start hearing that in their community, they're going to start to wake up.
Do you think so?
I do, because they may make up stories about why they've awoken, but people don't like to die. And really it comes down to that. Right now, it's all about their ego and about getting approval from Trump and feeling powerful and strong like Trump. That's kind of how they look at it. And when their own family members or friends or their teacher at school or whoever it is gets sick, it's going to start hitting home. The sad part is, by the time that happens to any density, it's just the virus will be so out of control. It's just absolutely, I say this over and over, it's just abhorrent what we're watching happen. It's just horrible.
And predictable. I mean, the stuff we've been talking about for a while. And, on this issue, I defer to you because I view you as an expert of someone worth listening to on this. I look at the CDC director came out today and said that that he believes that, the number of infections could be as high as 10 times higher than what the official number is now, putting the toll somewhere over 20 million people in this country infected.
Yes. And the good news about that is that hopefully people will be able to start getting tested for immunity and start donating, because we're really, really short on people that are going in to get their blood drawn for donating to people that are very sick. So hopefully we'll be able to have that going pretty well. I think some states are better than others at making that all work. So There's a lot of kinks to work out right now. We've got, this whole thing has brought up so many broken things in our healthcare system. We've got short-term issues, which are, of course, the masks we're talking about. We've got the social distancing issues, teaching people about that, the treatments for the disease itself. What to do about people that don't conform? Like, what if we have laws for masks? How do we deal with that? What do we do with people that purposefully try to infect someone? Like, all these questions are going to be coming up, but we've got long-term questions.
That's a great
too.
question.
Health.
Someone sent me a video of an old woman coughing on a 1-year-old, and I'm like, where are those cops that were trying to arrest George Floyd when we need them?
Exactly, and there's, I mean, I hate to think I have a devious mind, but I have a lot of ideas in my head of how things could go wrong in that respect. A scientist I was speaking with today was talking about something that I think we briefly touched on before, which is bathrooms. When you go to an event, it may not be the event itself, which is such a big problem, especially if it's in a large space or even outdoors, but everybody has to go to the bathroom. And most bathrooms are not ventilated very well. In fact, a lot of them are not ventilated at all. So let's just say you have an outdoor event. You've got 100 people, but they're all going into the same bathroom. And one person goes in there and coughs and has virus, and we know that can hang in the air for hours. I mean, that is potentially a transmission thing. Again, another one of these short-term things. We need to find out if that's really part of the problem, because ventilating bathrooms might be helpful. You know, there's a lot of ways we can solve and decrease the number of infections.
Yeah, and it just highlights the fact that there's so much we don't know, that wouldn't you err on the side of caution as opposed to, oh, the hell with it, we're all going to die of something anyway?
Yeah, and, you know, I hate to say this, but, like, right now, if you're on a road trip and you go to a gas station, I mean, you might want to just pee on the side of the road or something, because, like, I wouldn't want to go in a closed, non-ventilated gas station bathroom right now. It seems to me, I think we're going to come upon other risk factors like that, but it seems to me that is an extraordinary risk factor because of the sheer number of people coming in and out. So you've got, you know, in the daytime, maybe 400 people come in and out of there, and no ventilation, and, you know, probably doesn't get cleaned all day long. Doesn't seem like a good place to be right now. Don't go in gas station bathrooms.
Yeah. And it only takes one. I mean, you know, I was looking at the numbers.
It only takes one.
Right. I was looking at the numbers for the county that I live in, and it said the infection rate is like 1 out of every 300 people, which isn't bad.
Whoa.
You know, when you look at the numbers of other places. I believe that was the number. But they said that was like 1 out of 300. I'm going, you run into 300 people in the course of a couple of days. You think one of those people could have it? And the answer is yeah, quite possibly.
Yes, and here's another one for the list of short-term issues. I have heard so much about this in the last few days. What do you do when you are trying to do a socially distanced haircut or something like that, and the person, maybe it's not even your hairdresser, maybe it's somebody else in the room who takes off their mask, coughing, sneezing, whatever, not paying any attention to isolation issues. One person I talked to said she got up and walked out. She was like, I'm leaving right now. But also, you know, you might even be at the store. I see people do this all the time. They pull the mask under their nose. Why are you doing that? Don't do that.
I can't breathe. Don't like the smell of my own breath.
Well, I think they get comfortable. Like, they're talking to me and they feel very comfortable, and so they just down the mask. And it's like, I think we need a code word. We need a safe word for the entire country that you say to someone when they're doing that, when they're doing something unsafe, like pulling their mask under their chin. So I'm going to put that out to everyone. If someone thinks of a good safe word, we need to start putting that out, because I had it happen today. I had some workmen in there, you know, one person just pulled it under her nose, and then within minutes she just pulled it off.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no.
Looks like they're wearing underwear on their face. Yeah, but you know, I forgot. Someone sent me a meme of with the punchline being, you know, the people who pull it under their mask, under their nose, are the ones who failed science class, because hello. But here again, you know, I had someone say, well, at least it's, you know, covering your mouth is better because that's where all the spittle comes out. Is there any truth to that?
No, I mean, yes and no. Yes, it's probably more out of your mouth, but no, it comes out of your nose too. There's moisture. In fact, your nose has turbinates, which the whole goal of those turbinates is to moisturize the air. So when you're breathing out air that has moisture particles in it.
Last question.
It's built that way.
Yeah, last question I've got for you. I mean, we see all this going on in the South. Are we expecting things to get much worse? Do you think since the governors, of Texas and Florida and maybe some of the senators are coming around, any hope here?
I see hope with both those people and with the. I mean, they can read polls. They're seeing when you kill your constituents, you're not going to win the election. And I don't know why that hadn't dawned on them earlier. But it seems to be dawning on them now. Or maybe they didn't understand the science, or maybe somebody was really strong-arming them, or maybe they're coming to terms with the fact that they are murderers by doing this. I don't know what their thinking is, but they are coming around, but not enough. They're not making mandatory rules. They're not using fear in their voice so the electorate can take them seriously. They're not going far enough, but certainly it's a little better than it was. I mean, the doctors that I speak with are just, with knots in our stomach over what is about to happen. And once you start down that slide, there's no going back. Once we have, 50,000 cases a day, you can't turn that Titanic around on a dime, where it will take us months to do that. And then guess what? We're at the end of the summer.
Yeah.
And then we're going into fall. Like, do we just get a little respite then and then we hit the fall? I mean, this is brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Isn't this supposed to be the respite period? Isn't this supposed to be the period of calm when it's hot? Because we were told the heat was going to kill it. It would wipe it all out. We wouldn't have these problems anymore.
I was hopeful we were going to get a little bit of a break, but clearly Florida, Texas, Arizona, even California is having problems. There's issues all over the country,
right?
But it's not going well, and we're definitely in for a rough ride. But guess what? We're going to do it together, and we're going to hang on to each other, and we're going to, my friends and I would call when we get to the point where we're like, oh my God, I can't take this, and we just talk it out. I mean, I know everyone's doing that, or go out and walk and get some exercise and, be around people that you love and just try to get through this. We're going to get to the other end of it. It's just going to be rugged.
One way or another. But Dr. Sennholz, I appreciate the time. As always, good information. Thank you so much.
You're so kind. Thank you.
Again, I appreciate the time. But, I'll tell you, these people with these mask cards claiming that they're exempt, nonsense. Utter, complete, and total nonsense. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
We will prove that they knew as early as the 1950s that carbon dioxide from fossil fuels was dramatically heating up the environment.
Minnesota sues ExxonMobil for lying to the public about climate change.
The day after the tweets, Antitrust Division political leadership instructed staff to initiate an investigation that very day.
DOJ whistleblowers expose corrupt investigation into fuel-efficient car makers. Plus, chemical giant Bayer to pay billions to settle Monsanto weed killer lawsuits.
All of those killer lawsuits and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
These defendants had a duty. Worse than that, they had a duty to disclose in a way that was not misleading.
He said duty. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, so some big accountability news for a change this week in the Green News Report.
Yes, very remarkable. First up, chemical giant Bayer agreed in district court to pay up to $11 billion to settle more than 100,000 legal claims that its weed killer Roundup causes cancer. Bayer admitted no wrongdoing and maintains that the toxic herbicide is safe, but the World Health Organization labeled it a probable human carcinogen 5 years ago.
No wrongdoing, but they agreed to pay how much?
$11 billion.
Okay, just because they're nice.
Roundup is manufactured by Monsanto, now a Bayer subsidiary. Bayer also agreed to pay up to $400 million to settle cases from farmers alleging that its weed killer dicamba drifted onto their crops and killed them. But wait, there is even more. Bayer also said it will pay another $820 million to settle most claims for exposure to PCB, a highly carcinogenic chemical once manufactured by Monsanto that persists in U.S. waters decades later.
But again, no wrongdoing, I'm guessing.
Yeah. In other news, 2 Department of Justice whistleblowers testified to the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday about unprecedented levels of political interference and corruption by U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr. Now, remember how last year 4 automakers entered into a voluntary agreement with California to abide by its more stringent tailpipe emissions rules?
I do.
DOJ employee John Elias testified that his unit was then ordered to launch an antitrust probe of those automakers despite no evidence.
After news reports indicating that the president was enraged by the arrangement and wanted to retaliate, President Trump criticized the deal on Twitter. The day after the tweets, Antitrust Division political leadership instructed staff to initiate an investigation that very day.
The investigation was quietly dropped a few months later, and the incident exposes how the corrupt Trump administration has tried to weaponize mechanisms of government to block action on climate change.
Hasn't tried, has succeeded. So once again, Donald Trump is using the DOJ as his own personal political weapon.
Yep, and this is just one that we know about.
We do now.
More accountability. Minnesota State Attorney General Keith Ellison announced this week that he is suing oil giant ExxonMobil for violating the state's consumer protection laws. Ellison alleges that Exxon, Koch Industries, and powerful oil industry lobby, the American Petroleum Institute, knew as early as the 1950s that burning their product caused dangerous man-made global warming, but chose to fund a 30-year disinformation campaign to mislead the public.
These defendants knowingly directed, conducted, and funded a campaign to deceive and defraud Minnesotans and Americans about the dominant role of fossil fuels in causing climate change in an effort to keep their profits flowing, no matter who it may harm.
Ellison's lawsuit includes claims for fraud, failure to warn, and separate violations of Minnesota statutes that prohibit consumer fraud, deceptive trade practices, and false statements in advertising.
We have seen similar suits like this in other states, I believe Massachusetts and New York, that have run into problems. Is there any reason to believe this suit won't run into similar problems in Minnesota?
This one is different. This one is under consumer protection, not climate liability for causing damages.
We'll see.
In North Carolina, a federal judge has ruled that parts of the state's ag-gag law violate the First Amendment. The law was passed by North Carolina's Republican-controlled legislature and sought to punish unauthorized disclosure of information about unethical conduct and violations of animal welfare laws on farms and in slaughterhouses, including to the news media. And finally, a federal appeals court has ordered the cancellation of a long-disputed oil and gas lease on land in the Badger II Medicine area in Montana. The land is considered sacred to Native American tribes in the U.S. and Canada. The ruling ends a 40-year-long fight by oil company Solonex to drill in the Blackfeet tribe's sacred lands.
You're right. Some good accountability news for a change in the Green News Report.
Yep.
Are you okay? For much more on all of those stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you can file this under the heading of never let a good crisis go to waste. And look, they don't. We've been talking about the last couple of days, the tourism industry and their lobby going after the American Trip Act to give rich people tax breaks to go on vacation. Now the banking industry has had their lobbyists going full tilt boogie. And today the news was that banking regulators have unveiled some new rules that are going to make it easier for these big banks to, well, basically destroy our economy down the road again. If you remember, after the last collapse caused by the big banks, we enacted, something called the Volcker Rule that, said that, banks had to have more, assets at hand. They couldn't, be as risky as they had been. Some more accountability over the riskier, more complex trading mechanisms that they have. And, it takes me back to when they were talking about derivatives and, all of the mortgage-backed securities and all of these complex investment issues that, and I still remember Greenspan's comments, because he was asked about, should we be regulating some of these really technical investment products? And he said, they were too complicated for regulators to understand. And it turns out that they were too complicated for the industry to actually understand, which is what put us, into the mess that we were in. Evidently, we're just going to undo the rules that we put into place to stop what was put into place to try and stop another 2008 type collapse. Now, I was all in favor of going back to the Glass-Steagall era, where you separate banking, boring banking of mortgages and car loans and, the boring stuff, from that of the risky gambling stuff. What the end of Glass-Steagall did is it took down that dividing wall and made all of that boring stuff able to be, packaged and gimmicked and schemed and all of that, to steal from Granny and from pension funds. It's really what it was. It was the smart people on Wall Street figuring out, how they could line their pockets with our money. And now we find out that our banking regulators are doing it again. This time they're just, throwing the doors back open. The other side of this is that the new rules are going to according to Reuters, relieve banks from having to set aside cash to safeguard derivative trades between affiliates within the same firm. They say this is going to free up about $40 billion in cash that they had in reserves. This was one of the big arguments of the bank. We shouldn't have all this money just laying around. We should be able to gamble with it. This is like the addict's creed, man. I've got rent money. I can blow that. That's kind of what we're seeing here. The addicts on Wall Street, the greedmeisters on Wall Street, see this pile of money just sitting there, as a hedge against all of their other bad deals, and they're like, "Hey, we can gamble with this. Think of how much more we could make for ourselves." But in the process, what they end up doing is putting the entire economy at risk. But hey, that's okay. Somebody else will clean up the mess. Isn't that wonderful? And also under the heading of never let a good crisis go to waste, evidently the Trump administration now, according to Reuters, is attempting to end congressional review of arms sales. Now, they're saying that, chances are it's not going to go through because Republicans are not happy with taking this review away and taking more from Congress. But the fact that our fearless leader, our dear leader, would throw this out as an option, saying that he and he alone should be the arbiter of who we sell guns to, scares me. Seriously, judging by the tendencies that this guy has, I don't know that arming authoritarians around the world is a good thing, because generally they turn around and they bite you in the behind. And his track record of using his gut to feel people out, I don't know if it's all that great. And I don't know that I trust him. Now, like I said, fortunately, there's going to be opposition from the Republicans because they're not going to want to give this up. leaders on the Senate Foreign Relations and the House Foreign Relations Committee. They're where right now they review any of these sales of weapons, and they have the right to block sales, which has happened, recently with the Saudis because of, well, if you remember, the whole chopping up of the journalist, that kind of got them, and also the stuff going on in Yemen. Maybe we shouldn't be part of that. But Trump wants to sell his guns wherever he can. It's all about the art of the sale, is it not? Scary, scary times. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where we're